The last time I talked to you guys, I thought that was a one-off conversation, that we were going to talk about how dysfunctional the Republican Party had become. And I'm running out of adjectives, Jen Rubin. I'm truly running out of things to say, because we know that the Republican Party's a bit broken. But in fairness, historically, we've also had at times when the Democratic Party's a little bit broken. This surpasses all historical norms.
It absolutely is. We've gone, 17 days now without a speaker. This is not a failure of one party to negotiate with another or to pass a difficult piece of legislation. This is simply picking a leadership amongst themselves. And this is extraordinary. They are completely paralyzed. This is the natural situation, the natural consequence of Donald Trump's dysfunctional, violent, crazy party. And although I am very sympathetic to those Republicans who have received death threats, perhaps they now understand what people outside the Republican Party have experienced when they've crossed Donald Trump. When it was Democrats, when it was independents, when it was members of the media who were receiving these sorts of threats, we didn't hear boo from these people. Now that they're getting it, the shoe is on the other foot. So I think it is really difficult to see how we get out of this. But one thing that's clear, and that is we have a functional, impressive president and a dysfunctional, clownish House of Representatives led by the Republicans.
And I want to get to that point about the president in a moment, but I want to, hindsight being 2020, things are becoming very clear much clearer as we look back. On September 13th, Mitt Romney published a piece in The Atlantic where we found out he wasn't going to run again, in which he talked about Republicans in the Senate who didn't vote to convict Donald Trump in his impeachment norm. He writes, when one senator, a member of leadership, said he was leaning toward voting to convict, the others urged him to consider. You can't do that, Romney recalled someone saying. Think of your personal safety, said another. Think of your children. The senator eventually decided they were right. So that's the author of the story writing about what Mitt Romney said. In hindsight now, when you read that, you thought to yourself, well, that's kind of weird that would happen. And now we're realizing that there's like a basic thuggery that seems to exist among the supporters of Donald Trump in the United States Congress.
And it's worse than that, Ali, because it's going around the country, and it affects not just politicians who are cowardly in what they've done, fearing personal safety, but also their political careers. But of course, we've seen it with violence now against Muslims and Jews. It's becoming a culture of violence in the country. And you're right, we can take some of it to Donald Trump and some of it to talk radio, social media, and other things. I want to put this into a little bit of other historical context, though, Ellie. Let's go back 30 years. Newt Gingrich pushed aside Bob Michel, who was the last great Republican leader. 4 years later, Newt Gingrich was pushed aside. His successor, it appeared to be Bob Livingston, couldn't make it because he had to admit that he'd had an affair when the whole thing was impeaching Bill Clinton. Then we had John Boehner pushed aside. The logical successor, Kevin McCarthy, at that point was pushed aside for Paul Ryan, who couldn't last for more than 4 years. And then we had McCarthy, and now we've got this farce. You said you thought it would be a one-off. See you next week.
Sadly, that's entirely possible. Jennifer Rubin, help us draw the contrast about what we're seeing in the world right now. And this is not about whether you agree with Joe Biden or you even agree with what he's saying and having to do with Israel. Joe Biden and his team are demonstrating old-fashioned shuttle diplomacy. They're flying around the world. They are deeply involved in dealing with the Ukraine situation, dealing with the situation between Israel and Gaza, dealing with the potential and ongoing threat of China and North Korea, and the fact that Iran is in the middle of this tinderbox. It is quite a different scene in the president's world and the world of the administration than it is at the United States Congress.
It is an amazing split screen, isn't it? You have Biden, who is not only leading America, but frankly has become almost the titular president of Israel, because they have a leader, frankly, who is incapable of showing empathy and kindness and understanding. So he is playing the role of griever in chief, not only for America, but for another country, for Israel. He is making those difficult decisions, as you said. He is engaged in diplomacy. Just today, we arranged to have two of the hostages held by Hamas released. So whatever, as you say, whatever you think of the policies, he is functioning and behaving as a president of the United States should. He delivered a serious grown-up address from the Oval Office last night that frankly even had a lot of his critics impressed. And then the other side of the screen, you have these clowns who are screaming at each other, who can't pick a leader, who can't get organized, who lurch from one individual to the next, one scheme to the next. And Americans have to look at that and say, this party, the Republican Party, is incapable of serving. They're incapable of governing themselves, let alone governing the country. And I hope Americans are paying attention to this and taking away the right lesson, which is unless you get rid of these people and put an emphasis and put a premium on getting a new type of Republican Party, that's what we're going to be stuck with for the foreseeable future.
I just got back from Israel on the weekend, and you're not kidding me. I heard a lot of Israelis telling me they'd rather have the decisiveness and authority that Joe Biden is providing in some cases than some people even have what they've got in Israel. Norton, let me ask you something. Joe Biden made the comment that people who want to deal with America are looking at us for leadership. There are a whole lot of people who don't want to deal with America, authoritarians around the world, who are also looking at the dysfunction in America and perhaps seeking ways to capitalize on it.
I think there's no question about that. We have become, in so many ways, a farce to the rest of the world, but also this sense of weakness and leadership. And that included harsh criticism of Biden, even while he was trying to deal with these international crises. We know a substantial number of people in Congress who want to cut off aid for Ukraine. We know that they continue to push impeachment of Joe Biden. And let's not forget, Ali, that Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise, Jim Jordan, the failed ones now, all voted that the election had been stolen, that Biden is an illegitimate president. Of the apparently 11 candidates now running to become speaker, 9 of them voted that the election had been stolen, right in the immediate aftermath of the violent insurrection. So, of course, foreign leaders are looking at this, and our adversaries are saying this is great. And Russia, in particular, which has been trying to sow discontent and division in America, has to be saying, boy, did we do a good job.